Okay, we're going to start. If you can grab a seat, and if you don't have a chair, there are more up here. Please take some. Show me the battery. I know. Okay, there we go. If those of you who are reading, you really got to stick your fingernail hard on this. It says mute, but it's not. I'm Lynn Vitti. Welcome. This is National Poetry Month, and in 2 days it's National Poem in Your Pocket Month, so you might be able to pick up a poem for Thursday. There's some free books on the back table. Take one. So I'm the Poet Laureate of Westwood. This is our first big event. Thank you. I'm going to read a short poem. It's not my poem. You'll recognize whose it is. And then we're going to start with the open mic right away. Then we're going to get to the Tuesday workshop poets. So, this poem is entitled In Just by E.E. Cummings. In just spring, when the world is mud luscious, the little lame balloon man whistles far and wee. And Eddie and Bill come running from marbles and piracies, and it's spring when the world is puddle wonderful. The queer old balloon man whistles far and wee. And Betty and Isabel come dancing from hopscotch and jump rope, and it's spring, and the goat-footed balloon man whistles far and wee. Written in 1920. So, the last two lines of the Marvel poem are, the seduction poem, the grave's a fine and private place, but none do there, I think, embrace. Thank you so much, Sherry. That was great. So our next poet told me that her favorite band is Florence and the Machine, and I didn't really quite get this because I had to look up Florence and the Machine, and I found out that Florence and the Machine they're a chamber pop, which is a subdivision of something band in England that they had their first record released in 2003. So I would like to know how you know about this band. That was before you were born. Our next poet is Lucy Seckler, who will be, as of May 8th, when the select board confirms this, our Youth Poet Laureate of Westwood for the next year. Okay, this is working. This is working. You want to hold it? You can hold it. Yeah, okay.
Hello? All right. Okay, I have two poems that aren't very long. The first is called Suddenly Springtime. We are shocked to shed our jackets, blindsided by the sun searing stronger every day. Tiny purple petals in the mud freeze us in our tracks and make us ask, what are we still wearing boots for? There hasn't been snow or slush or even a drip of ice in weeks, and still we think of spring as forbidden fruit still holding its breath under frozen ground, but it has bloomed tall and all around us on weak, whispering stalks. Every year, we wait for warm wind to blow winter from our eyes, show us green, yellow, pink, where we had forgotten there was always meant to be. And this is Founding of an Island. There was a mountain that raised its brow above the sea. One day, it didn't feel quite itself, and red-hot, white-hot, sun-hot magma melted and bubbled up its throat, and crashed, then eased, then creeped down the slopes, hissing and screaming when it met the waves. Then its tempers cooled, and red faded to black, and it sat, until debris and minerals collected in its pockets, until lost seeds sat in the wasteland and grew. There was a seed that reached down until it hit rock. It unraveled green leaves despite the sea. Another, till it sown an army that marched up the black slopes into the mountain's eye and called out to birds overhead, "Here is a new place. Come down and see."
Thank you, Lucy. This is just the first of our next poet. Our next poet is actually, before she was a poet, but she's still a journalist, and has written a wonderful true crime book with a lot of other important stuff in it called Murder in the Combat Zone. So she's kind of our star. But she's a beginner at poetry, she says. And she also claims to have, as a teenager, teenagers, cover your ears, she hung around bowling alleys a lot as a teenager, but she never once bowled. Jan Brogan.
I did a lot of stupid things as a teenager, which is why I love teaching. I teach teenagers in the summer because I can totally relate to them. All right. Can you hear me? All right. Watching the Great British Baking Show with you. Again, way past noon, and not yet having had our coffee. Again, in our pajamas. We are glued to the sofa, the television, Paul Hollywood and Prue, who replaced Mary Berry. Noel, in goth eye makeup, now MCs with the brand new Harry, who replaced sidekick Sandy, who joked that her expanding waistline was the reason she had to leave the show. Again, we start a new season with your third newborn, who we pass between us. Are we really up to number 11? The year of COVID isolation in the tent. You nursing, me burping, you pumping, me laying the baby across my knees or pacifying her in my arms, aiming a breast-shaped bottle as you doze off mid-episode. Again, we are on to cake week. Again, biscuit, bread, and pastry weeks. A first ever week without gluten. We analyze the contestants, varying ages, education, accents, their sense of flavor and measure, and pick our winners. We know who's in the lead. But wonder why the amateur bakers originate from Italy, Germany, South Africa, and France, but never America. Is it because the show is so very un-American, so uncutthroat, with the contestants hugging each other after a success or disaster, instead of trying to shake each other's confidence with eye rolls or bakery trash talk, eggshells and spoiled sugar? Instead, they bond over cake collapse. While we never once consider a fast forward to see who wins Star Baker. The prize is only a fancy cake plate and a bouquet of flowers. What? We wonder about those steaks as we change another diaper and memorize the cremes, anglaise, mousseline, patisserie, and diplomat, the meringues, French, Swiss, and Italian, the cold and hot water pastries, butter is it, or lard? We'd forgotten so much since your last newborn, when we were both so addled by her colic, desperate to soothe while Mira glazing slid off a warm sponge. I can't remember a single bread or cake from those middle child seasons, while you learned all about fondant. But I remember making Mary Berry's orange cake because you had an orange tree when your firstborn came into the world during the show's debut years. Now at baby number 3, we await the focaccia episode and plan to make millionaire shortbread. Again, kissing the top of a newborn's head, soft as choux dough. How many times can you kiss a newborn's head? We wonder as we watch an entire baking show season in less than a week, and debate the choice of filling for your 2-year-old's birthday cake, raspberry mousse, creme pat, or jelly. You triumph in chocolate, baked on less than 2 solid hours of sleep, with your every sip of water turned to breast milk. And yet, despite the perfectly piped Paw Patrol motif, I critique, as the judges might, a chocolate biscuit base would be better next time, a crunch to balance the sweetness of the raspberry. You consider carefully, but debate the raspberry mousse might have been too much. Next time, a ganache.
That was one of our favorite poems this year, and we all went home very hungry. I haven't heard all of these poems, but I had heard that one and a few other ones, so it's nice to hear them again. We read them twice at the workshop. We read them standing up and delivering and practice. My next, somebody's getting a call. I just called to say. Our next poet says, since she can't paint on canvas, she uses the brush of language to color her thoughts. Karen Michelson. Trying to bring this down.
Okay. Well, now that we are enmeshed in a New England spring, I'm encouraging you to follow my poem back to December and Christmas time. The poem is The Gift. Since I was 10, wait, glasses, hope. Since I was 10 and old enough, my mother allowed me to go to midnight mass with her. Bundled up, we left a warm house full of friends and relatives celebrating Christmas Eve. And we drove to St. Aloysius, the large Romanesque basilica located in a neighboring town. The chilliness of the church did little to warm, its vastness eerily illuminated by candlelight shadowing. The white marble altar adorned with red poinsettias cascading below the hanging crucifix. Statues staring at us. Stained glass windows darkened with blankness. Seated in a crowded pew, I almost dozed off until communion bells chimed. I watched people shuffle to the altar as the organ somewhere in the balcony accompanied an operatic voice. The sound soaring through the dome. Even the statues looked stunned. I turned around, looking for the source, when Mother whispered, "Richard Tucker, Panis Angelicus. We never know when he'll come here." I forgot about presents and the next day's celebration. I was warmed by the beauty of the sound suspended in my mind. Thank you. So for those of you who are not familiar, Richard Tucker was the lead tenor at the Metropolitan Opera Company in New York City. And as a gift, each Christmas he went to another church and sang. My second poem is Most Mornings. Most mornings I give my goose down pillow a swift punch to dislodge the loneliness of the night. I tell myself nothing has changed if the pillow is reshaped like its twin on your side, undisturbed since you left. Other mornings I wake wondering, was my cheek brushed by some loving closeness in the night? I make the bed and see your pillow indented. On these mornings, there will be no punch. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It was lovely. So our next poet, well, I think the next poet should just come up and do his thing. This is Mike Dwyer. And this is the 54th anniversary of his coming to America. So we have several immigrants in our workshop, and Mike is one of probably the longest standing. So, do you need a mic?
I'll try it without first. So my first poem is about a dog, just to bring you all back, ground you all back here again. And I called it Border Collie. You showed up on a fair day evening, a hungry, hunched, mangy, half-sized pup. My father ridiculed my brother for bringing such a collop home. You had enough energy to follow us on the roundup on dipping day, where you were tossed into the tank to sink or swim with the sheep. In a few weeks, your hair grew long, took on a sheen of black and white. You trotted along, alert and confident, as if you had decided to live. In a month, neighbors' cattle wandered in amongst ours, but we were too busy to cross the river and drive them out. Why not send Shep, I thought. It was as if Shep had been listening. With little urging, he took off, crossed the river, up to the far field, separated and chased the strange cattle. That pup's intelligent, granted my father. It was only the first sign of a dog whose intelligence and work ethic grew as he grew to become the talk of local sheep herders. Then the day came when I was leaving. We were in the hill and sat together. Looking into his brown eyes, I told him he would not see me again for a long time. He reflected my feelings, and we both looked out over the ocean that would separate us. I called him darling then. 6 months went by, and I returned. Shep never once barked when I walked around the taxi in darkness to take my suitcase. He ran up the path to greet me. No one else have I called darling before or since. This next poem is about a restaurant here in town which closed down 4 or 5 years ago. And it was a terrific place for breakfast. It was called Anne's Lunch, across from the present Dunkin' Donuts. It's been replaced by bakery. Breakfast at Anne's Lunch. The building, like an old deck of cards, predates regulations, setbacks, and codes. Too near the curb when concrete trucks roar by. The facade, like an owl's face but square, leans towards the setting sun. One step up to the well-worn floor, Jeannie greets behind the long black counter, fixed red swivel diner seats, the last 2 saved for John, Norm, or Dan. Booths on right go back to the partition that screens supplies, and sometimes Ralph holds court on current issues with a force stirred up inside his splendid witty crown, while trotting twixt abandoned stoves with retro tops, knows well to customize the usual for Al. How long before the ceiling sheds its peeling, or the 9/11 poster hits the floor? We all know it's coming. The new bakery, spiling our ham and eggs or coffee refills, silencing the banter that lured us winter mornings when snowbanks saw us through the upper sash, and cleats were cleared by stomping, announcing the elderly Summer Street couple arriving early to their booth by the window to chat and read their Kindles in perpetual calm. Thank you.
If you never went to Anne's Lunch, you've missed your chance. I have a companion poem. We didn't know that there was that these were companion poems until I shared a poem that I had written about the new place, and I refer to Anne's Lunch as described to me by my husband as a greasy spoon held together by nothing more than old calendars and pictures of buildings. Anyway, Anne's Lunch, R.I.P. Our next poet is a bona fide introvert who taught herself how to be an extrovert. She can toggle it back and forth. And that is Marilyn Gove. Where are you? Marilyn.
I'm going to flip on the switch. Lucky you. It could get depressing otherwise, you know. I'm going to take this opportunity now, otherwise in public I won't have the opportunity, but I relocated from Southern California as an original Bostonian back to Boston 2 years ago. I was in Concord for 6 months and then Westwood. And I thought, oh, I really have to do something with myself and whatever ability I have. So I came down to the library, and the next thing you knew, I was in this poetry workshop that Lynn was facilitating. And it became really such an important place for me. There's just a group of wonderful poets. I considered myself emerging at that time. Now I feel I have emerged. So I think a lot has taken place over 2 years' time. Just such a democratic, space where we can all nourish one another and each of us is flourishing. So I did want to thank Lynn and maybe embarrass her a bit in front of everyone, as well as the library for opening its doors and all the poets who are in the workshop. Thank you so much. Secondly, I have 3 poems, and they're so long we'll have to have a sleepover tonight. I'm just trying my switch out, Don't worry. They're short poems, I would say, and I'm going to use the mic just in case anyone here has a little difficulty hearing. The first 2 are about my parents. My parents were the children of immigrants who fled the pogroms from Russia, before World War II. And of course, the rise of the Third Reich and the subsequent Holocaust. They never spoke about it in the house, but that silence really had a devastating impact on the home life. So not to worry, the poems won't depress you, they just are what they are. But I did want to sort of, honor them by saying something about them now. So the first one is called Winthrop, Mass., 1960s. My father sits in the corner, conversing with shadows, sits in the corner, cutting ice cream with a knife and fork. My sisters turn from him. I tell a joke. Desperate to entertain, he looks past me, flicks his fingers upwards, mutters imaginings into an inattentive ear. Tomorrow, I will shake him loose, walk the verdant highlands, climb the sky on the squeaky swings near Sewell Ave, dally on the gentle slopes of Fort Heath, then reaching the town beach, watch seagulls dive into the wild sea, their strokes taking me farther and farther away. I think that's one of Lynn's favorites, so I read it tonight. The second one is about a traditional Jewish blessing that would occur on Friday nights at sundown called Shabbat Shalom. And just to give you a little information, Shabbat is Hebrew, meaning prayer or time for prayer. Shalom is Hebrew for peace. If I'm wrong on any of that, I know my colleagues will correct me. Shabbat Shalom is a prayer for peace and a time for rest. So this is a prose poem, and it's divided into 3 sections. The sun sets with Shabbat Shalom is the title. 1. The gray bone of winter pounds the northeast with cruel winds and heavy snow. Whiplash streets howl with despair. Trees topple and power goes out. Shabbat candles dot the darkened house with circles of light. 2. Father sits in the kitchen, skinning a Hostess snowball. Deftly, he lifts the pink coconut marshmallow from the chocolate cream-filled cupcake and sets it beside the pan-fried matzah, sliced bagels, lox, and Philadelphia cream cheese. He licks his sweetened fingers and devours the processed treat. He does not speak or share. 3, Mother stands in the kitchen, a prayer towel covering her tightly permed hair. The Shabbat candles are lit. The blessing she recites has become routine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirishanu v'mitzvot tov v'tzivanu lahalik ner shel Shabbat. Mother waves her long, slender fingers 3 times over the candles, drawing the holy energy towards her. It looks like a magic trick. I wonder if she prays for a happy life. And the last one, anybody here ever have a reoccurring dream? Good one, bad one? They're interesting, huh? This is called, oh, she's had one. She's really nodding. Yeah. She's still having it down front here. This is called a dreadful dream. You approach from the right, your body in sight, fuzzy with black and wide yellow stripes. I hear you there, buzzing near, your high-pitched whining enveloping my fear. My adrenaline races, my legs take flight, night after night after night after night. Don't you have somewhere else to play? A flower to pollinate, a bumblebee soiree? Why buzz angrily after me? Can't you see I'm short of breath? A fistful of tightness gripping my chest. I sprint nearly as fast as you're able to fly, knowing your stinger might cause me to die. What must I do to let go of the fear that sanctions this dread year after year? I must stop running. It's perfectly clear. To free myself from this hapless fear, your antennas begin sensing new calm in my chest, the din of your whining begging to rest. I turn and walk slowly towards the winding beach, waking this time fully at peace. Thank you.
Great rhyming. You have a contender. We have a guest poet next. Our guest poet has many achievements for her fun fact. One is she has a degree in music composition from Berkeley, which is a pretty big deal. She is certified as an ASL interpreter. And she's a poet. Jane Hart.
I'm going to try the mic. Oh, it already popped out. How's that? Okay. Next with the glasses. Thank you, Lynn, for including me in your obviously very impressive group. I'm going to read 2 shorter poems. They're both inspired by my environs. I live here in Westwood. The first poem is a Cape Cod scene. You'll recognize the name of the beach, I think. And the second is an observed moment in my yard here in Westwood. The first poem is First Encounter, November. The high bluff holds us like a ship. Down on the beach, a smudge in the unfriendly skies, a Batman box kite nose-diving, never crashing onto washboard sand. I unhook my despair, slip a knot of it to one bobbing corner of this crazy kite. The ones we made in childhood, triangles of worn sheet tied to dime store dowels, finished with a scrap of silk blouse, hung on like this one, giving over again and again, embracing abandon, as if that was the only way out. And the next poem is called Choked, and it begins with the dedication. Choked, for Christine Blasey Ford. This morning, a brown oak leaf caught in the chalice of a coral hibiscus. Intruder, bringer of bad news, summer's demise. Invasive English ivy has insinuated itself inside the screened porch. Found chance, that chink between panel and clapboards. All season inched, and wound stem and leaf into one bare back corner. I haven't the heart to cut it, tear it out. Invasive because it chokes other plants, creates what's called an ivy desert. But something about this vine, its curve and curl claiming air, reminds me of seahorses. Genus Hippocampus. Hippocampus from the ancient Greek hippos, meaning horse, and campos, meaning sea monster. Hippocampus, twin curved horns in the temporal lobe, pliable and vulnerable, important to the limbic system, involved in emotions, the cementing of memories. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next poet is our rhymer-in-chief of this poetry workshop. And his fun fact is that he sometimes looks at completed crossword puzzles to write short stories from. What a great idea. Brian Mish.
I have three, one medium length one and two short ones. A day of work at an alligator farm. Gathering eggs at the break of dawn. Hope the mom doesn't charge with a reptilian temper. Make sure the eggs don't break and do not turn them. Put up with heat, humidity, and mosquitoes. Gingerly place the eggs under some dirt. At higher temperatures, the eggs will be mostly male when they hatch, and at lower temperatures, mostly female. No one looks forward to cleaning the swamp of alligator or crocodile effluent. Likewise, no one looks forward to wading in among hungry, aggressive crocodilians, and no one likes to kill the gators to make footwear, clothing, purses, meat, etc. And you aren't considered a true alligator farmer unless you have scars to prove it. Thank you. And does anyone know what red tide is? It's algae, dinoflagellate algae that becomes poisonous in mollusks and crustaceans. Red tide. An algae bloom can cause you doom if you eat the shellfish. It'll be your just desserts if you're very selfish. An algae bloom can make you ill, don't you eat the oysters. If you do, like aging nuns in 6 foot under cloister. An algae bloom can cause distress. Please don't eat the mussels, which will affect you inside out, especially corpuscles. And the last one, thank you. Stream of consciousness. Oh. All right. Stream of consciousness. We travel through time and we don't spend a lousy dime. The world is so sublime. Cards of tarot, Clarence Darrow, broken dead or dying sparrow. Predict tomorrow, world of sorrow, No more money left to borrow. Thank you.
Sherry wants me to read a poem, so I'm going to read a poem. This is a spring poem. In reading this over, it occurred to me that because I'm from Maryland, there's a term here that you don't hear a lot in New England. We call them daffodils or narcissus here in New England, but where I come from, hon, we call them jonquils. So this is a poem which I would like to dedicate to my late friend, Mike Moore. He was a journalist. He was one of the first black journalists on CBS. He did mostly writing and off-camera work. He was a wonderful guy, and I knew him from the time I was about 15. We were pals. Nickel Dreams. Along the Fuller Brook path wending through backyards, there's no one about except a few women with small dogs on leashes. The brook, not as high as I expected. The blackened piles of snow are all melted away, roof rakes, ergonomic shovels, the chemicals we strewed on sidewalk and porches, mere memories of winter. The sun strains to appear. It warms the day, but I can hardly see my shadow, perhaps only a faint suggestion of a shadow, a darkening, barely perceptible. On a day like this, full of spring's promise, I cut an armful of jonquils from my mother's garden, wrapped them in newspaper, a cone around the butter yellow blooms so fragile their stems easily snapped or bent. Go to 30th Street Station, Mike said, for the transfer. But watch out if you're there right at 6 when the dogs are left off their leashes, dogs in gray flannel suits carrying smart leather briefcases. I understood. He loved to quote Dylan. I don't want to be a singer in the rat race choir. As I rose near my stop on the Paoli Local, an old man glanced at my flowers. I withdrew one and handed it to him. Without a word, hopped off at Haverford. Mike stood on the platform, his long scarf artfully draped around his neck. Tweed sport coat festooned with buttons of Lenin, Freedom Now, Stokely Carmichael. We walked through the campus, his arm around my shoulder. This will be my life, I thought. His roommates were out. We skipped dinner, built a fire. We talked about the war, about Yeats. When it was late and we were so hungry we couldn't stand it, we strolled to the Blue Comet for the cheeseburgers. I can remember even now how good they tasted. We walked the back way to the women's college. I'd set up camp in the guest lounge. Mike kissed my cheek, handed me a nickel the Paoli Local had flattened into an oval, Washington's head all distorted. I carried it around for years, that talisman of my life to come. Where's my last poet? Oh, there's my last poet. And our last poet, last but not least, because I didn't want to follow her, because she's so good. Our next poet's interest in words and meaning may have been piqued by a terrifying misunderstanding that dates back to her childhood. She was sitting awkwardly on the stairs to her grandmother's apartment with her head stuck between the balusters. Her father said he might need to use a saw. Deborah David.
Now we'll see, move that, but I want the symmetry, center of the room, I think. Can you hear me? Loud and clear? Okay. Now, as Lynn said, I don't know, was hypersensitive, I guess, and listening carefully, but not always understanding what was said to me when I was a child. I really thought that my head was going to get sawn off on the occasion that I remembered. There's something about that sort of sensitivity, that sort of feeling the turbulence spiritually or socially or in various settings, that I think poets often will pick up on and find ways to express it in their poetry. Lynn gives us prompts in our Tuesday sessions, and there was a prompt to think about a problem we had with a summer job or a job experience that really wasn't quite as it should be. And it prompted me to write this poem, which does involve some turbulence. So buckle your seatbelts. It's in 7 parts. And I called it On the High Road to the Low Point of That Summer Job. One preface: I grew up in Canada, in Nova Scotia. And for those who remember their high school Latin, Nova Scotia means New Scotland. Sorry, Mike. So there's some Canada in this. Canada, a country where people form a mosaic from many different places, many different cultures. And even has a policy of 2 official languages. So, on the high road to the low point of that summer job. 1, a grumble of gravel, a momentary hush. A blue and silver bus sits where the shoulder briefly broadens. The driver cranks open the door. Passengers stagger forward. Your hand steadies them as they exit. Careful now. Next person. Like a ventriloquist, you fudge the ends, gulp each breath. The Acadia Line's bus is chartered for a day trip around the Cabot Trail. The promise of Nova Scotia's beauty, a July break from campus for French-speaking teenagers come to immerse in English. 2, your job title, second language monitor, AKA teacher's sidekick. Qualifications: English mother tongue, camp counselor, available on very short notice. Imagine the court jester, comic relief in a jingling hat. Imagine the cheerleader, rah-rah pom-poms from the bleacher. It's up to you to enliven the 3 o'clock doldrums. Bring dime store props to jazz up classroom skits. Lead clap and count games. Everybody clap. 1 frog, 2 eyes, 4 legs, kerplunk in the puddle. 2 frogs, 4 eyes, 8. Where's the clapping? It's up to you to do that. Number 3. On the Trans-Canada Highway from Halifax to Cape Breton, a sing-song helps pass 3 dreary hours. Knees high, you march in place to cadences. Oh, when I get to heaven, when I get to heaven. You mind the repertoire of musicals, golden oldies, the hit parade. Hello, Dolly, you bellow. And then with the Bee Gees, you're staying alive, ah, 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 ah. 4. At the scenic highlands, the road narrows, zags and zigs around switchbacks. The telltale sound interrupts the fun. Fricatives and throaty phonemes practiced in the language lab devolve into a din of gutturals and moans. Uh-oh. You witness students and staff up and down the length of the bus, overtaken by contagion of motion sickness. Rubber ridges down the center aisle become a sluiceway for a vile tsunami. Inexplicably, you are spared. Adrenaline fuels your first responder reflexes. Mouth breathing shields you against the rising stench. 5. You would gladly swap your sandals and summer outfit cutoffs for sturdy work boots, long pants. You remember Mr. Kelly. He used to wear them. He was the janitor in your elementary school. He always had a jingle of keys at his waist. You wish you had scoops of his sweeping compound, oily green meal that captures puddles and dirt. The pine scent, epitome of clean. Mr. Kelly used to describe arcs with his wide push broom, grazing the toes of your shoes. And he entertained with a chuckle, a wink, and a deft somersault of dentures. 6. Like a rodeo clown, you dart around in the chaos. You mop up knees, wipe chins, swab foreheads. You gather ponytails at the nape of lowered heads to save long-haired casualties from their own spewed ejecta. You commandeer beach towels, flourish an accordion of folding paper napkins. You collect sopping trash in plastic bags, scrounged from lunch kits and totes. Mercifully. 7. Dispenser of TLC, you tut-tut, hum, coo. The pre-trip vocabulary list, vista, magnificence, seascape, ebbs like low tide into the far distance. You supplement it with today's word, barf. You enunciate, it's all over my shoes. Oh, on the bonny high road, lads and lasses, what overrides language is gut instinct.
That's what dropping the mic is all about. I got one shorty for you, and then I'm going to send you off. Actor. When we met on the steps of Levering Hall in winter, you told me your favorite song was Greensleeves. Your cigarette, Marlboro, and the writer you adored most, James Joyce. And did I want to come see you in Le Balcon next weekend? Because you had the role of chief of police. And afterwards, we could go to the cast party at Fred and Charlie's flat downtown. But I was only 17, still in high school. My parents would never have gone for it. And so I declined, but not before I accepted a cigarette and a light, saying, maybe next summer when I turn 18. Thank you all. Thank you, poets, poets. Take a bow. Thank you, audience. Thank you, friends and family. Thank you, lovers of poetry. There's some free books on the back. Take a water or a lemonade or a cookie on your way out. And remember, there are poets everywhere. Thank you.